I admit I was a bit confused by the Space and Time for You quest. Not by the events themselves or the lore they presented, but solely because this quest has some kind of time travel in it. And yes, I know that Genshin has its own god of time and all that, so I shouldn't be confused by timey-wimey shenanigans going on here, but her existence does not necessitate the need for time travel. And to add an extra layer of weirdness to it, Hoyoverse doesn't even like time travel. Like, at all. It doesn't matter if you look at Genshin Impact, Honkai Impact 3rd, or Honkai Star Rail, you will not find examples of true time travel. Experiencing time loops within a dreamscape? Sure. Resetting the simulation of a computer world? Yeah. Attempting to go back in time to change the past only to end up jumping into another timeline entirely? Absolutely. You can have all these time-bendy shenanigans and more, but you will not find true time travel. And that's what makes the Space and Time for You quest feel so out of place to me. Plus, the time travel in this quest comes with a bootstrap paradox, which is horrible, solely because I hate paradoxes. They fill me with the urge to become a physicist so I can dedicate my thesis to destroying their very existence. But I am no physicist, I'm a theorist. So the best I can do is look at the facts and determine the reason why Hoyoverse has suddenly decided to overcome their allergy to time travel. And that means explaining why this quest actually has no time travel in it. But before we start this trip, I do think we have space in the itinerary to make some time to talk about the sponsor of today's video, the Red Magic Astra gaming tablet. This tablet is the perfect blend of phone size convenience and the screen size you only get on large tablets. And just to show you what I mean, here's a size comparison. We've got a phone, a regular size tablet, and the Red Magic Astra, and an original Nintendo Switch for scale. And here's the Red Magic Astra and Nintendo Switch on a scale. Look how light the Red Magic Astra is for all of the screen you're getting. The lightweight form factor makes gaming sessions so much more comfortable. And the Red Magic Astra comes with all the amazing features the Red Magic series is known for, like the laptop-grade liquid metal cooling technology, which keeps your battery happy and prevents your hands from getting sweaty. It's also got some pretty impressive speakers that can deliver high-fidelity audio. And the battery can deliver over 5 hours of 60 FPS Genshin Impact and Honkai Star Rail playtime. Plus, this OLED screen is incredibly sharp, very bright, and extremely colorful. And not to distract from the gaming performance or anything, but I've gotta say, the Astra is a really nice size for artists on the go, because it's just about the size of a regular A5 sketchbook. Now, I don't actually have a stylus that will work on a touchscreen like this one, but I think I'm gonna pick one up for the Astra because it's really comfy. And if I've managed to pique your interest, check out my link in the description to learn more about the Red Magic Astra gaming tablet, and maybe you'll pick one up for yourself. I really like this tablet, and I think you will too. A huge thanks to Red Magic for sponsoring this video, and now it is time to talk time travel, or lack thereof. To make things easier to follow, I have made a chart. This flowchart essentially breaks down the rough timeline of events starting with the twins' arrival and ending with the choice at the end of the Space and Time for You quest. You can pause the video if you want to look at the chart more closely, but for the sake of time, I'm just going to be following the paths that the keys take throughout this whole mess. Because there should only be 2 keys, one for each twin, and yet we ended up with 3 keys. And that third key is odd because technically we get it from Deirdre, who gets it from us, who then gives it to us again, and then we give it back to her in this seemingly endless loop. For this reason, the third key has no point of origin and is therefore classified as a bootstrap paradox. It's a key that was never created yet somehow exists. So if we want to understand all this time travel stuff, we have to understand where the third key came from. So when the twins first arrive, we know that there are only 2 keys. Like I said, there's key A for the traveler and key B for the twin. Key B is in Conria with the twin, while key A is in an undisclosed location with the still sleeping traveler. When the cataclysm hits, Deirdre somehow appears with a third key, key C, which then prompts the twin to go find the traveler who still has key A. The twins try to flee this world together, but they get separated by the sustainer of heavenly principles. So the twin gets sent back to the cataclysm along with key B, while Deirdre allegedly holds on to key C for 500 years as a hilichurl. The traveler holds on to key A until they find hilichurl Deirdre with key C in Natlan. At this point, the traveler has both key A and C in their possession until their twin arrives with key B. Now, all 3 keys are in the same location. And here's where the real problem starts. At the end of the quest, you can choose whether or not to keep key C or to give it to Deirdre. If you choose to give her key C, she takes it and, in theory, travels back in time to show it to the twin. But if you decide to keep key C, it will stay in your inventory, meaning the traveler will possess both key key A and key C at the end of the quest. However, keeping the key means Deirdre never shows it to the twin, which is an event that must happen, so the twin gives Deirdre a key. But since in this route, the traveler still has keys A and C, the twin must have given Deirdre their own key, so key B. And that means, depending on your choice, the key Deirdre shows the twin 500 years in the past can either be the twin's own key, key B, which sort of loops back on itself, so it sort of is in two places at the same time back during the Cataclysm and also at the end of the quest, but otherwise appears to have just made a single loop through time. But if you choose to give Deirdre the key, then Deirdre gets key C, which she got from you. But you got it from her, but she got it from you, and that's how you end up with the bootstrap paradox, because this key, the third key, key C, has no point of origin. So either we have a key that loops back on itself in time, or we have a key that manifests from nowhere. Given that both choices are possible, we have to assume that both choices are canon, or at least can be canon. And therein lies my problem, because rationalizing a time loop is simple enough. After all, it's not too dissimilar to what happened with the Sacred Sakura, and there are technically like 3 potential ways to resolve a bootstrap paradox, but finding a solution that can resolve both at the same time, aside from going, I don't know, it's magic, don't think about it too hard, there's really no way to resolve this in like a clean, elegant, pseudo-physics way. You know what I mean? And before you argue that there doesn't need to be a good explanation as to why both these things can be canon because we have a god of time and the god of time is just going to do whatever she wants with time and it doesn't really matter in the end, that is not how Hoyo operates. They don't just hand wave away an explanation with, it's just magic, bro. They are the nerdiest of nerds. If they're going to do magic time travel, they're going to give it a proper explanation. That's just how they work. But this all got me thinking. If it really is impossible to solve the time loop paradox conundrum through the lens of time travel and pseudo-physics, perhaps this isn't actually a time loop paradox type deal at all. In fact, maybe there's no time traveling happening at all, just the illusion of time travel. I mean, that would certainly be on brand for Hoyoverse. As I alluded to in the intro, they do this kind of thing a lot. And once I started to think about the problem from that perspective, things started to click into place. Time moves a little bit differently into that than it does in the Abyss. That much is indisputable, but the actual time difference varies quite a bit. Child spent 3 months in the Abyss while only 3 days passed into that, but historical records indicate that Takamine the Mistsplitter ventured into the Abyss and stayed there for years, only for a similar amount of years to pass into that as well, although we don't really know the exact number. We'll talk a little bit more about what might be going on here later, but given that Conria was located either in or bordering on the Abyss, I think it's safe to assume that time in Conria behaves the same way as time in the Abyss does, which is different from time in Teyvat. I think traveling through 2 different times would be rather tricky, but not impossible. To complicate matters further, the Abyss is said to be made up of isolated spaces. So not only do we have different behaviors in time, we also have different locations in space. And I think that would make traveling through time really difficult, if not impossible, because you wouldn't just be traveling through one dimension, the dimension of time, you'd be traveling through 2 dimensions, the dimensions of space and time. And to make matters even more complicated, we now know that Teyvat is a proper planet that kind of got bubbled within a firmament that cut off all contact with the rest of the universe. And it's this isolation that lets Teyvat have its own laws. These laws are likely issued by the entity that we know of as the Heavenly Principles, because in Chinese, the Heavenly Principles literally refers to the laws of heaven that govern the behavior of both humanity and the physical laws of nature. Time should be defined under one of those laws, seeing as it is a force of nature. And a similar related law would be the law of fate, because fate is a factor of time. See, the existence of the law of fate suggests that time itself is predetermined. The end of everyone's story has already been decided, and the average person is powerless to go against their destinies. In religious circles, fate is a rather contentious topic because in some religions, like Christianity, free will is a fundamental right of a person that is given to humanity by God so that humans may freely choose the path of salvation. That's kind of the whole point. And if fate exists, then free will is nothing but an illusion, and that goes against their religious doctrine, so that's just not gonna work. But the reason why this fate versus free will debate was even a thing was because prior to Christianity's rise, many schools of thought, like ancient Greek Stoicism, believed in a concept that Nietzsche dubbed the eternal recurrence or the eternal return, and this claimed that the universe existed within a loop. Whenever time reached its end, the universe would be destroyed and then reborn exactly as it was in the beginning. This is pretty similar to like watching a movie, reaching the end, and then rewinding the movie movie so that you can watch it all over again. In this scenario, fate is a thing because time is cyclical. Fate is merely a declaration that the events of one loop are the events of another loop. Now, the oldest non-draconic civilization in Teyvat is based on ancient Greece, and conveniently, Nietzsche's works are referenced all over the place, especially in the desert. And this kind of matters because Nietzsche was the one who really revived the Grecians' concept of the eternal return and gave it its new name. So I personally think that this debate between fate, free will, and the nature of time is quite relevant to Genshin, and to our whole time travel debacle. Now, Conria existed outside of the boundaries of the heavenly principles and therefore did not have to bend to the rules of fate. So Conria and the Abyss must have free will and are thus experiencing linear time. Conversely, since Teyvat has fate, its time must be cyclical. And that means that we're likely working with a space-time structure that looks something like this. This bottom area represents the outside world, which includes the greater universe, the Abyss, and Conria, all of which are experiencing near infinite linear time with no event repeating itself. Sitting on top of this linear time is the bubble of Teyvat. It's circular, cyclical, and stuck in an endless loop. Now, I have to make the assumption that there must be some points in space-time where Teyvat and Conria overlap, and one of those points is right here. The moment Deirdre shows the hibernation chamber key to the twin in Conria. If these 2 points in space-time overlap for a moment, then there's really no time travel happening here at all because Deirdre has never left her current space-time. And as we saw in the Space and Time for You quest with Natlan and New Conria, 2 worlds with overlapping space-times can interact with each other for as long as they continue to overlap. This also suggests that during the Cataclysm 500 years ago in Teyvat time, the space-times of Conria and Teyvat overlapped in multiple places, which is how the horrors of the Abyss flooded Teyvat from underground. And I'm pretty confident that this is the case because at this point there should be 2 travelers, 2 Abyss twins, and 2 Deirdres. In Conria, the Abyss twin is preparing to face Doomsday while the traveler is still asleep in their hibernation chamber, and the original Deirdre is somewhere in Conria being chased by rift hounds. Meanwhile, the traveler in Teyvat is awake and looking for their sibling, and the Abyss twin is making a backup copy of old Conria while Deirdre has manifested from that backup and met the woken traveler. New Conria's Deirdre is the one who meets the traveler and gets the key. So it's New Conria Deirdre that meets the Abyss twin during the Cataclysm in Conria because their spacetimes just so happen to overlap. Kaya and Arlecchino are a bit like Deirdre in that they're not really supposed to be in Teyvat. Arlecchino's bloodline was supposed to have died out, and Kaya should have been cursed with the rest of the Eclipse dynasty. But if we assume that either of them were in a place where 2 adjacent spacetimes overlapped, then maybe they just got stuck on the wrong side. The thing is, there's 2 parts to space-time. There is time, which is Istaroth's domain, but there's also space, which is Asmodee's domain. So rather than sit here and tear our hair out over the complexities of time travel, what we should really be doing is looking at the possibility of space-time travel. Heavy emphasis on the space part. Now, which shade showed up during the Space and Time for You quest? That's right, Asmodee did, the god of space herself. Well, her little portals showed up, but that suggests that she was at least watching the events unfold. Now, I do think it's possible that Istaroth is helping out a little bit here. In fact, I think the gods of space and time might be partners in crime. Full disclosure, I've been working on this theory for a full week, and there's at least 5 drafts of this thing at this point. And when I initially wrote down the idea that the shade of time and the shade of space were actually collaborating together, it seemed like a massive stretch. But I was ready to swing and hit a miss. And I was also about 3/4 of the way through editing this video when Hoyo dropped this lore teaser about the shades. And now my speculation doesn't feel quite so out there, because we can glean a lot from this teaser. Like the fact that Renova was the one who obliterated Conria, not Asmodee, and that Asmodee is actually missing and has been missing since the start of the game. Istaroth even suggests that Asmodee may have switched sides, and that she may even love her new master more than herself. But the entire time Istaroth is talking about this, she both looks and sounds guilty, as if she's in the same boat as Asmodee. And my suspicions were only exacerbated when she bestowed history upon that old woman and made her recite lines about how each shade defies reason, which is extremely strange because reason is the power of the heavenly principles. So tell us how you really feel, babe. Also, space and time are nearly inseparable because they define each other. You can't have space without time, and you can't really have time without space. So I think it's very possible that these 2, at least, are collaborating at some level, either actively or because they just happen to share a similar desire and their methods of meddling work pretty well with each other. So what does that mean for the bootstrap paradox? Well, it simply can't exist, because a paradox paradox would go against the rules of the world. It would imply that the shades are going against the heavenly principles, and I think that even if the shades were dissatisfied with their boss, they probably aren't bold enough to defy them outright. Even Renova looks nervous at the prospect. I mean, the fact that a paradox would violate the rules of Teyvat is the reason why Renova had to concede to the captain in the first place. He was an undying being who was sentenced to die. She could not allow him to trigger a paradox of death, and I'm pretty sure this rule applies to the rest of the shades as well. I don't have super solid evidence for it, but Nahida's 5th character story does come to a similar conclusion. It states that one cannot eradicate oneself because that creates a paradox. That's why Rukkhadevata could not eliminate herself. She had to pass off the responsibility to another version of herself. That was the cleanest way to avoid a paradox. So no paradox is allowed. Those are the rules, and even Istaroth has to obey them. And that means the 3rd key needs to have a point of origin. So either Istaroth intervened directly and crystallized a memory into a copy of a key and left it there for the traveler to find, which is something I find a little bit unlikely given the circumstances, or Asmodee is bending space to allow one key to exist in 2 places at once, which is a bit more believable, but perhaps still a bit unlikely because I'm also not sure if that's a paradox. But there is a 3rd option here, and it is the option that I prefer. See, I think that one of the keys either isn't real or just doesn't exist. But to understand why I say that, we need to turn the clock back a bit and talk about Sumeru. During the Sumeru Archon quest, the entire nation was trapped within Nilu's dream. Every night, time reset, so once morning came, no one remembered the events of the previous day, except for Nahida, who wasn't trapped inside the dream at all, but instead tapping into the dream from the outside. Now, I think this Samsara model is actually a microcosm of Teyvat's cyclical time, but instead of being a single day's worth of time, it could be hundreds of years worth. It's not like anyone would ever know because their memories are being siphoned off and fed into the dream machine. The only reason the traveler became aware of what was going on was because Nahida never lost her memories. So she was able to basically restore the traveler's memory from a backup at the start of every loop. But just knowing you're inside of a dream samsara is not enough to break you out of it. You need to find the host of the dream and wake them up so that the dream can finally end. In this case, the host was Nilu, and just before she ends the dream, she tells the traveler the story of Rukkhadevata's first sage. He eventually overcame that calamity, found the Dendro Archon he had been looking for, and then he woke up. Because everything was just a dream. The first sage never actually went on a real journey, he just dreamed of one. Normally, I would pay something like this no mind, but technically speaking, the traveler is the first sage of Nahida. So what if this was just clever foreshadowing? What if the traveler is currently sleepwalking their way through Teyvat? I know that technically the traveler was awakened by their sibling, but after Asmodee separated them, the traveler was thrown into what felt like an endless nightmare and they woke up in Teyvat. But what if they didn't wake up? What if their real body is back in the hibernation chamber and Asmodee had just split the traveler's mind from their body in order to smuggle them into Teyvat? Honestly, that would explain why Irminsul can't tamper with their memories. Nahida was tapping into the dream cycle from the outside, so the Akasha couldn't reset her memories. And if the traveler is sleepwalking, then they're also tapping into the dream of Teyvat from the outside, and that's why Irminsul can't tamper with their memories. And if this really was the case, then the traveler probably wouldn't even be aware of it. After all, the difference between them and Nahida is that Nahida was doing it on purpose. So without being aware that they're sleepwalking through a dream, they probably believe that they possess a real copy of their own key on their person, when in reality, that key is an illusion, the key that we never saw, while the key the traveler found in the cave was their real key that Asmodee placed there for them to find. In this scenario, there are only 2 real keys, so Asmodee only needs to move the traveler's key through space. So she takes it from the sleeping body and then puts it into Teyvat where the sleepwalking traveler can find it. And from there, the perceived paradox resolves itself, because if you keep the key, the twin gives their key to Deirdrith, which then eventually moves to New Conria. And if you give Deirdrith the key, it also ends up in New Conria. Now the only difference between the 2 choices has absolutely nothing to do with time loops or paradoxes. It just boils down to whether or not the key stays in your inventory. A sleepwalking traveler could honestly explain a lot of things in this game, like how Renova apparently can't see them when they're in Teyvat. Perhaps the very nature of their their current existence makes it difficult for gods at a higher level to see them, the same way only the traveler could see Nahida in the Samsara. And it could also explain why the Abyss Twin won't tell the traveler anything of importance. Because according to Nahida, telling someone who's lost their memory things that they've forgotten before they're ready to hear it could literally blow their mind. Like, I'm not even kidding, it would cause serious brain damage. So that means the traveler has to finish the journey and figure things out for themselves. Now, the Sumeru Samsara was powered by the Akasha, which mimics Irminsul, so it's reasonable to assume that Irminsul is also like the dream machine for Teyvat. But outside the shared dream lies a near-endless chaotic space. Countless bubbles of empty dreams belonging to the dreamers that are trapped inside the Great Dream bounce around freely. Each dream is essentially its own domain, where things like time and space are dictated by the dreamer. I was thinking about this concept with regards to Asmodee, because the lore teaser confirms that each one of those cubes of hers is actually a chunk of space. Or maybe it's a chunk of space-time, since the two are rather inseparable. Over time and under certain circumstances, those space-time cubes grow unstable, just like the empty dream bubbles in the Samsara. The repeating pattern here makes me think that the Abyss might work in a similar way, in that the true Abyss is nothing but an endless void space, but there are unstable pockets or bubbles of space that are floating around within this void space. These unstable bubbles could possibly be claimed by talented individuals like Skirk, who can shape them however they like. Conversely, bubbles may simply mirror the aspects, wills, or desires of whoever enters them, and that would be very on brand for the Abyss given how much it loves mimicry. And maybe all this bubble stuff explains what domains are. In fact, I made a video about this back in version 1.5, and it has aged remarkably well. But I do wonder if the proliferation of Asmodee's cubes around Conria weren't an attempt at destruction, but preservation. Like, what if Asmodee was attempting to preserve what she could of Conria in isolated little blocks of space-time during the Cataclysm? That kind of fits with the dream bubble theory in reverse, and it also tracks with an old theory of mine, that she had the souls of the Conrians in those cubes. The idea still works, the scale is just bigger. But the point I'm trying to make is that Teyvat might just be one of Asmodee's cubes on a massive scale, in the same way that Nilu's big dream was full of other people's small dreams. And as I already mentioned, it's very possible that Irminsul is their dream machine, and that this gold stuff that drips down into it are the memories of the heavenly principles. There might even be a bit of a feedback loop going on here, like there was with the Akasha. We already know that Irminsul collects the memories of everything in Teyvat, but perhaps at the end of a cycle, all of the memories that are within Irminsul are fed back into the heavenly principles, who serves as a host of the dream. Maybe they sift through and arrange those memories however they please. Maybe they do this over multiple cycles and iterate on the events that take place. But let's not confuse these subspaces like the dream bubbles with real space. These dream bubbles and abyss domains appear to be rather flexible in the way that they behave, like they don't really obey the laws of physics well. And that suggests to me that they exist on an entirely different layer of reality altogether, like some esoteric cognitive realm type thing. But in real space, Teyvat is a normal planet that's been cut off from the rest of the universe by the heavenly principles. The fact the interior behaves like a dream world is neither here nor there. But that said, there must be a reason for this isolationist move, and the only logical conjecture I can think of is that Teyvat was at risk of being destroyed at one point. So bubbling Teyvat and trapping it in a sort of dream loop seems pretty plausible. And if that threat was abyss related, which it likely was given the timing of recent lore drops, then perhaps the heavenly principles was trying to expunge all abyss related energy out of Teyvat, thereby reducing the threat risk. But after the Cataclysm, they fell silent. So if they were trying to do dream maintenance at one point, they're still in there doing dream maintenance. Meanwhile, the Shades are just standing by awaiting orders. Well, except for Asmodee. Now, I admit, I wasn't quite sure what Asmodee's motivations could have been for defying the heavenly principles. But then I realized that the four shades of the heavenly principles are basically the equivalent of God's archangels, and angels were created without the capacity for free will. You know how we talked about free will versus fate earlier? Well, fate is kind of like signing a contract. You have no choice but to obey its terms, and in Genshin, sharing a name means you share a fate. This ties names directly to fate, which is convenient because demons can be controlled using their true name. And the relationship between the shades and the heavenly principles does reek of contractual obligation. So perhaps it's not that they don't want to defy them, or that they have no reason to, but more so that they can't defy them. And maybe that's why Istaroth's fragment, Venti, cherishes the ideal of freedom so much. Perhaps Istaroth wishes for her own freedom as well. As for Asmodee, I think she had a chance encounter that gave her a taste of free will, and that's why she went missing. Okay, so the power of the heavenly principles is the power of reason, logos, and language, because biblically speaking, language is the power of creation. Conveniently, both twins seem to possess the power of reason in spades. Now, the Narzissenkreuz quest revealed that the power of reason could be represented by anything, but ideally it comes in the form of a sword, the Sword of Reason. Also conveniently, both twins started the game wielding unique golden swords. You might have noticed, though, the Abyss twin still has their sword, but the Traveler doesn't. So have you ever wondered where it went? Yeah, Asmodee has it. She has the Traveler's power of reason. I'm not even joking, too. Watch this opening cutscene very closely. Notice how the sword is there in 1 second and gone the next? That's because she took it. Now, you also might have noticed that all the gods in the game bear the names of demons from the Lesser Key of Solomon, and Solomon was only able to command those demons thanks to his special ring and knowledge of the demons' names. If we associate the heavenly principles with Solomon due to their absolute control over demon gods, then the ring in this case is the power of reason, which means the ring doesn't have to be a ring, it can be a sword. So Asmodee has the Traveler's power of reason, or at least a manifestation of it. Due to their similar perceived nature, I like to think of the twins and the heavenly principles as being a similar type of being. So if the heavenly principles is Solomon, then the twins are also Solomons. So what we have here is Asmodee taking Solomon's ring of reason, or sword of reason in this case, which is actually a story that happens in the Quran. Asmodeus gets their hands on Solomon's ring, but they later toss the ring into the sea where Solomon fishes it up and then pulls it out of the fish he caught. Now, I think the Traveler fished something up from the sea. What was it again? Oh, right, it was Paimon. We need to make a very important assumption before we continue. Venti is a fragment of the Thousand Winds, and the Thousand Winds is another name for Istaroth. Ergo, Venti is a fragment of Istaroth. They are not the same demon, but they're related, which is why they have different demon names. In the same vein, I would like to pitch the idea that Paimon is a fragment of Asmodee, a fragment that also contains the Traveler's reason. She's also the fish that Solomon caught. Now, as the Traveler journeys around Teyvat, they're recovering their powers, right? Well, the Traveler studies every new power with Paimon's help. It's very similar to how Solomon recovered his ring from the fish he caught. But wait, there's more! There's an Islamic tale called The Nights, where Asmodeus teaches a young prince about the 7 layers of hell. Paimon guides the Traveler through the 7 nations of Teyvat, and the Traveler has been called a prince or princess either by the Abyss Order or Lilupar. Is that a coincidence? And you know how Istaroth suggested Asmodee loves her new master more than she loves herself? Well, Paimon is the demon most loyal to Lucifer, and the twins are representatives of the stars of daybreak, which is technically just Venus, and also the star most closely associated with Lucifer. Ergo, Paimon is the demon most loyal to the twins. My point is that I think the Traveler is Asmodee's new master, and they just don't know it yet. But that's also probably why Asmodee was spying on them in the Space and Time for You quest. Also, I lied. That wasn't my point. My real point is that because the Traveler is Asmodee's new master, that she loves very, very much, she wants to help the Traveler accomplish their goals. And what might those goals be, you ask? Why, changing the fate of the world, of course. I really hope I haven't lost you yet, because we're about to come full circle. The Subseru Samsara dreamscape required a dreamer to host a collective dream. That dreamer was Nilu. Nilu is a performer, and she performs primarily on a stage. So for that reason, and a few others that we're going to get to in a minute, I want to look at Teyvat as if it were a theatrical performance in a dreamscape. So keep this in mind as I continue talking. So in Greek mythology, the land of dreams borders the Asphodel Meadows, which just so happens to be one of the realms of the dead. I would like to propose that in Genshin, the Asphodel Meadows are represented by the Sea of Flowers at the end. The only real difference between them is that instead of asphodels, we have intevats. Intevats are the national flower of Conria, so the Sea of Flowers at the end should be in or near Conria, and that makes Conria a realm of the dead and also bordering the land of dreams, which is Teyvat. That also checks out with what we know from Per and Harry, because if you remember, in order to get into Conria, you had to declare that you were dead. But here's the catch. The Traveler has been searching for these intevat flowers for a long time prior to reaching Teyvat, claiming they were from their homeland. Now, it is impossible to say for sure if intevats could really be found on their original planet, but it's definitely possible that the Traveler was simply dreaming of a new home that had intevats on it. Like a prophetic vision or something. Because see, I kind of get the feeling that Conria is something like a home for the twins. It's already a second home for the Abyss twins, so it's really only a matter of time for the Traveler. And if that is the case, then surely the Traveler would want to save Conria from a terrible fate, right? And if that's the case, then I assume that Asmodee Asmodee wants to make that wish come true. But it's not easy to bring back that which has been lost. And Khaenri'ah's long since been destroyed, and even if it could be brought back, the Heavenly Principles would probably attempt to strike it down again. So it seems we're faced with a bit of an unsolvable problem. And how do we solve an unsolvable problem? Well, sometimes when a writer is faced with an unsolvable problem in their work, they can invoke the power of Deus Ex Machina in order to resolve it. The name literally means God from the machine, and it refers to a plot device that swoops in to flawlessly solve any unsolvable problem. Readers like to call this trick a cop-out, and that's probably because it is one. Now, the term originated in ancient Grecian theater, where it described actors playing gods that were supposed to swoop in and resolve the broken plot lines of the play. These gods either descended from above via a crane or ascended from below via a riser, hence gods from a machine. And in the case of the twins, we have one who is considered a descender, the traveler, and then the twin who isn't a descender because they ascended from below to Vat, because that's where Khaenri'ah is. This is literally a double Deus Ex Machina situation. But okay. We're thinking of Teyvat as a theatrical production, right? That means Teyvat proper is metaphorically the stage, and since Khaenri'ah is below Teyvat, Khaenri'ah should be beneath the stage, like in the trap room. Not only does this mimic the Deus Ex Machina structure, but it perfectly references another theatrical production, the Ring Cycle, an opera that pulls from Germanic myths. It's the same one that Nibelung gets his name from. So not only is this source of inspiration a theatrical production, but its world building lines up really well with what's going on here. Let me show you what I mean. So Teyvat is considered a tree-like world due to Irminsul's influence, and Irminsul is a reference to the Nordic world tree. At the top of this tree should be a bird called Vedrfolnir. And while he might not be a bird for real, the sinner Vedrfolnir waits at the end of time. So I feel like the top of the tree is a perfect location for him, because the top of the tree should be where reality ends, and that would also be where time ends. And then we have the Norse myth of the serpentine dragon Nidhogger, who's coiled around the tree's roots deep underground. While we have no mention of a real dragon in Khaenri'ah, many soldiers have mastered the 7 shifting serpent technique, which allows them to mimic elemental energy using only abyssal power. So that kind of places serpents below the stage, so below the tree. So we've got a prophetic bird at the top of the tree and some serpents at the bottom of the tree. And between them, there should be a messenger squirrel named Ratatoskr who runs up and down the length of the tree. That's why his name literally means traveler. During the Inversion of Genesis, Nicole says something rather odd when talking about the impossibilities of changing fate. She says,
"When a small animal runs into a tree trunk, though the tree may sway, it is not displaced. The same is true of fate."
So a small animal running into a tree trunk, huh? A small animal like a squirrel, like Ratatoskr, the traveler, the one who keeps getting accused of always wanting to change fate. And she says this animal runs into the tree trunk, but perhaps she doesn't mean this super literally. But seeing how Teyvat is a tree-like world because of Irminsul, then is it not possible that the traveler actually landed somewhere in Khaenri'ah initially, but was placed into Teyvat by the sustainer of heavenly principles? The way I mentioned earlier, where she kind of split the mind from the body and put the mind in the tree and left the body in the hibernation chamber. Just the fact that Asmodee would put the traveler into Teyvat feels very suspicious to me, and I'm starting to think that she grew fond of the twins over time, and also fond of Khaenri'ah, by association. As for why Khaenri'ahns moved below the stage, well, Dainsleif says some say a few are chosen and the rest are dregs, and it's pretty obvious in this case that the vision holders are the chosen while the dregs are Khaenri'ahns. And now that we know that Khaenri'ahns are likely people who are similar to Skirk's people, i.e. they are Abyss compatible, it makes sense that they'd be targeted and removed from the system since Teyvat has been facing Abyss-related threats for thousands of years, and the Heavenly Principles seems to be trying to mitigate that risk. So I'm picturing Teyvat as a sort of cosmic centrifuge, with all of the abyssal matter being flung out the sides as a form of purification. The timing of all of this checks out too, because the first abyssal invasion was during the Great War of Vengeance, and it happened around the same time Khaenri'ah should have been founded. Which means that Khaenri'ahns are basically being cast out of the great Samsara theater dream. So instead of experiencing the cyclical time of the performance, Conrians live in exile, and maybe that's why they resent the gods so much that they wanted to wage war against them. But now it seems that most Conrians just want their home back. And at least one of the twins wants Conria back too. And that means finding a way to give Conria its own act in the play. As of right now, the script for Conria has been written on the Loom of Fate, a small dream space hosted by Caribert. But because a new location has yet to be found, Conria still lacks a proper act number in the Travail trailer. And maybe that requires overturning or replacing the heavenly principle so that the Conrians can finally rewrite the fate of the world and stop being a dream yet to be dreamed. But no matter what, a location will be found. Conria will receive their act number in the play, and when they do, it'll be both the first and the last act. Because where a journey ends is also where the journey begins. And if you start your journey by leaving home, you'll end your journey by going back home. In the case of the twins, their journey began in Conria, so that's where the journey will end, with both of them standing in a sea of Intivats, which is really the perfect ending, because I can't think of a better way to end a successful theatrical production than covering a stage with flowers. You know, this theater thing is probably the reason why the Fatui are based on the Commedia dell'arte. They were founded by Conrians, so it feels like they're kind of mocking the theatrical nature of Tevat by embodying iconic theatrical archetypes and, doing crime. Feels appropriate. Also, there was nowhere to really fit this, but I think that Istaroth might be the reason why Paimon has a spotty memory of her own past. Paimon's crown looks quite a bit like Istaroth's halo, so maybe that's what it is, a marker that Paimon's time or history has been sealed away. If that's the case, then this little spiky bit on the front is actually the hand of a clock, and I think that's a pretty cute idea. Anywho, after 6-7 drafts of this script, one of which was done in a single night thanks to Hoyo dropping this stupid lore bomb of a video, I think I'm finally done. This theory isn't perfect, but perfect is the enemy of the good, so here we are. I think the ideas got across, so I think we're good. Well, if you're still here, thank you so much for watching all the way to the end, and channel members, you are extra awesome. Make sure to take good care of yourselves, have some fun, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.